Hey guys, welcome to Dystopia. At least that's what my friend Jason Burack likes to say, and he's back to join us here to document the collapse. Jason, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Dystopia, Sean. I can't make this stuff up, man. The truth is really stranger than fiction.
You know, I was thinking about this last night, how quickly confidence can be lost, causing the whole system to collapse. One thing that comes to mind as we talk about confidence in this con game of a system, Jason, is Deutsche Bank's failure to deliver gold, the Zetra or Extra, whatever the name of that company is. Deutsche Bank's failure to deliver physical gold sends a wake-up call to the world, and I want your opinion on that, Jason. But first, Deutsche Bank said, oh, well, you know, all you have to do is sell your shares and then go buy gold coins. And then the other thing causing confidence to fade quickly, how about Hillary's crimes? The FBI won't indict her, and her crowds are dwindling. I don't know if you saw that little tiny crowd in Ohio over the weekend, but this woman can't draw a crowd, and when she does, she has coughing fits, and nobody can understand a damn thing she says. First, your thoughts on the Deutsche Bank failure to deliver gold.
Well, I'm not surprised at all by this. There's been a lot of lawsuits in the past, whether it's Morgan Stanley or ABN AMRO, where these bullion banks, these investment banks, have been charging their clients for supposed allocated accounts of physical gold and silver. The client gets a statement that they're getting charged for insurance and to store the metal and all the other fees in there. And then when the client wants the metal, they don't have it. So, this has been going on for a long time, these games with the paper market and even with allocated accounts with these large investment banks where when the client actually gets the metal, and normally it takes a lot longer than it's supposed to. I mean, if they already have the metal, Sean, they should be able to deliver it if you're willing to pay the fees pretty quickly in a week or so if it's a large order of physical gold that they're storing for you in an allocated account. And yet, sometimes these deliveries take months. And then, they send you a list of the bars if you have an allocated account there, and the bars don't match. So normally it's newly printed bars that were created. So, this is the shuffle game that these banks have been playing. They've been getting away with it for a long time. They have the money because they can basically create it out of thin air. They're protected by the large governments. And they also have, an army of lawyers. So they normally just screw over their clients like this. So I'm not surprised that there's this is just the latest scandal. There's so many of these in the past. There was one with Morgan Stanley and a lot of physical silver. So these things are going to continue. Hopefully people will wise up and get smart. And if they have physical storage at a trusted counterparty, it should not be with one of the large investment banks. And they should be allowed to go there and go visit their metal and check and audits and stuff. I don't know what was happening, if it was individual accounts or if it was pension funds or large institutions storing there, but they should have been doing due diligence every year if they had a lot of metal stored there and going and checking, sending their own person there, a team of accountants or auditors to go and check the metal and the serial numbers and the bars and test. So I guess that wasn't going on. So there was a lot of screw-ups in this. But this is just how the system works with the paper price bullion Ponzi scheme that we have right now.
How quickly do you think we're going to hit a tipping point, though, here where people do lose all confidence in the system, Jason? Because I think people are starting to lose confidence, even those that aren't awake and can't articulate the things that we talk about. They don't understand what a central bank is. They don't know who owns the Federal Reserve. Case in point, Hillary Clinton and her crimes. She's not being prosecuted for her clear, overt criminality, and she ought to be, and people know it. People are angry about it. The FBI is standing down, not indicting her. And meanwhile, we see the Rothschilds, partial owners of our own central bank, holding $100,000 per head fundraisers for their puppet Hillary. People are waking up. Now, Deutsche Bank not delivering the physical gold. Most of the people listening to this broadcast get their information from the alt media. The alt media is all over that story. People are losing confidence. At what point does that total loss of confidence in this criminal system cause the whole system to collapse, Jason?
I think they can extend and pretend this for a little bit longer than most people think. There's people that are starting to wake up, but they don't understand that it's the Federal Reserve and the cartels and the corrupt bureaucrats that are causing the problems. In the United States, at least, a lot of people I talk to, I live right outside of Washington, D.C., there's a lot of people that notice that there's things going wrong, but they're blaming capitalism, they're blaming, the private sector. Okay, yes, there's lots of corrupt large corporations, but if you're a small businessman trying to survive, you don't have the money to be able to afford bribes, to politicians or to hire lobbying teams and get the laws rewritten like General Electric does so you don't pay taxes. There's so many examples of different industries in the United States being cartelized. We had the Mylan CEO, who's she's a daughter of a former congressperson. She was connected with the Clinton Foundation. She on a the EpiPen controversy, for your listeners who are not familiar, it's not a really amazing drug. It's really easy to make a generic of it, and she jacked up the price 600% in only a couple years, and she was blaming free markets and capitalism on it. That's bullshit. Okay, this is the FDA, the cartel, the FDA, the large, big pharmaceutical companies using the FDA to protect their profits and blocking all the generics and competition, all the small guys and the innovative guys. But the FDA routinely blocks a lot of good, innovative drugs and medical technologies from small companies, and they routinely allow to pass these large, dangerous drugs that have really nasty side effects and kill people from the large pharmaceutical companies. They get a free pass in a lot of cases. So it's not just the Federal Reserve with the large Wall Street banks that have created cartels in the economy. I think people are waking up, Sean, that there are massive problems in the economy, but what I'm most worried about is that they are blaming the private sector and free markets and capitalism for all this. We don't have free markets and capitalism. When we have central banks that are intentionally suppressing interest rates, when we have government bureaucrats that are trying to set up, I just saw an article recently that they're trying to set up cartels for fruits and vegetables and regulate the prices and move them higher so people can afford, for organics. So the companies that are making GMOs will be able to sell them cheaper, and the average person won't be able to afford the extra fees on the organics. So there's just so many problems throughout the economy. I could go sector by sector, industry by industry. I think what's going to happen, though, is that, after the election and, the elites really want Hillary Clinton to win, even though she's sick as hell. There's just so many examples of this. We saw with her coughing attack. Have you also noticed that, we're in the warmest parts of summer right now, and she's bundled up like it's almost winter already. So, I mean, when she was doing her Q&A on her plane in Cleveland, she just looked so sickly. I guess probably she didn't have her stool to lean on. It's just amazing the amount of propaganda pervasive throughout the economy. People are waking up, though, that the truth is not being told by the mainstream media. They're just not sure what it is because they've been brainwashed for decades by government schools and the mainstream media. Yeah.
Well, people are waking up, though. I had my parents and my wife's parents here over the weekend at our house visiting, and they brought up the EpiPen scandal. They knew a lot of facts about it, and these are people that are really sheeple people. They don't follow the things we talk about, but they're waking up to this overt criminality, and they talked about the criminality of these big pharma companies. The healthcare system, the costs are out of control. I just saw in the state in which I live, healthcare for people next year is planning to raise rates between 33 and 66%. I mean, it's absolutely absurd what's going on in this country, and people are waking up en masse. And I think people internationally are waking up too, because did you see what happened at the G20 over the weekend? China didn't roll out the red carpet or even the stairs so Obama could get off the plane, and so he had to come down the back door of Air Force One. And they completely snubbed him. Meanwhile, they rolled out the red carpet for Putin. Putin wants to make bridges. This country only wants to blow bridges up. And I think the world is getting sick and tired of it, Jason.
Well, it's gunboat diplomacy that the U.S. has been using, or jingoism. So the U.S. has normally set the policy tone literally since right after World War II. The U.S. has controlled most of the world for a very, very long time, directly or indirectly through economic policies or economic hitmen. The U.S. has been involved in selling illegal drugs offshore and in laundering the money back with the banks. So this has been going on for a very, very long time. The mainstream media won't cover a lot of this, especially in the United States, but a lot of people in other countries are very familiar with how the U.S. has been setting basically policies in so many other countries. And then if the country won't play ball, it's time for a regime change, which is interesting because, we had the Philippine president come out and insult Obama like that. And we've had, it'll be interesting to see what regime changes are attempted in some of these other countries that are insulting the U.S.
Yeah, well, I think this country is running out of cards to play. I mean, it can't continue to run around the neighborhood of the global neighborhood as the bully on the playground because nobody's putting up with it anymore, especially as the dollar has become so fragile. China and Russia are moving away from the petrodollar en masse, as you know. And we hear now talk of the gold-backed SDR or some sort of situation where there might be a gold-backed yuan, or at least the yuan playing a big role in whatever world currency is coming next after this dollar dies. What is your short-term and long-term outlook for the U.S. dollar?
Well, I think all currencies are in trouble. Someone was asking me the other day, if wealth is being transferred from the West to the East, shouldn't I buy Eastern currencies then? And my answer is no. That just means that the East has a developing middle class. They're producing more over there. They're actually producing goods and services. The U.S. is mostly just the U.S.'s best export right now, Sean, is printed U.S. dollars or digital dollars. So the U.S. doesn't actually make a bunch of goods and services anymore. We don't produce a bunch of stuff. We produce some value added stuff that's higher IP, but in general, we don't produce nearly as much as we used to. The GDP statistics are total BS. They're total fiction and fantasy. They count a lot of government spending, which is just enormous waste. They count consumer spending as being enormously positive to the economy. And that's, even if you burn down your house, I saw an article on this from an Austrian school economist that the GDP right now in the US, the calculations are if you burn down your house and another one has to be built, that's good for the economy. So it's just enormous waste is counted as positive in the GDP calculations in the United States. But, I don't trust anyone's fiat currency right now. Maybe there will at one point. I don't think China immediately will want to go to a gold-backed currency because that won't give them flexibility. I think they will continue to accumulate lots of physical gold and oil and other natural resources on the cheap when they can buy them. But I mean, the people running the central bank in China, they're awake to the gold and silver manipulation. They're still Keynesian, though. So they did a massive stimulus program after the 2008 collapse to get China booming. And that kind of sparked a large part of the global economic recovery because China needed so many extra commodities. So there was a lot of countries that had a big boom after 2009 during the recovery, at least through 2011, 2012. So I don't have a lot of faith in any central bank in any country right now to do the right thing. A lot of them are selling their physical gold and silver or leasing or swapping them out. We are seeing crazy things with the central banks, though, Sean, in this dystopian world we're living in, where the Bank of Switzerland has $1 billion in physical gold and silver shares, thanks to Louis Camersano's of Small Gold's excellent research. We found that out. We also found out that the Bank of Norway, not the Central Fund of Norway, which is their sovereign wealth fund, which manages like their oil surplus money, but the Central Bank of Norway is also hedging, buying gold and silver shares. We have the Bank of Switzerland also owning massive amounts of U.S. stocks. They're literally printing currency out of thin air to buy up assets, to either buy up bonds or buy up massive amounts of stocks. So the ECB is buying massive amounts of bonds, creating currency out of thin air. The Bank of Japan is creating currency out of thin air and buying up massive amounts of Japanese shares. If the Bank of Japan hadn't bought up massive amounts of Japanese shares, the Japanese stock market probably would have already crashed. So I think the situation we're in now is the central bankers, because of what happened to 2008, the rules have changed after Lehman Brothers in 2008. They are totally scared shitless of letting any major asset prices fall again, and the chain reaction that can occur afterwards. And this is why I think we're in an economic minefield right now. We were, drugged, we were roofied, we were tied up, we had a bag put over our heads, and we were dragged and put into an economic minefield where there are so many collapse or trigger points. There are mines all around us we can see that are visible, and then there are mines, 6 inches or a foot below the surface where if we take the wrong step, we can't tell, we don't have a metal detector, we don't have any of the equipment to detect mines. And so it's going to be very difficult, almost impossible to get out of the minefield without massive amounts of pain.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lewis from Small Gold. I was listening to, it was actually your interview with him, in which he made the point that if the Federal Reserve had come out in 2008, 2009 and said, we're going to just print trillions and trillions like they've done, it would have killed the dollar overnight. But what they said was something completely different, and, they're going to taper. And meanwhile, things have only gotten worse. And you know what else, Jason? I interviewed Pastor Lindsey Williams several times in years past, and Lindsey said that the Federal Reserve will sooner or later own everything. They'll own all of the mortgages, all of the best assets. They're just going to buy everything up. And that's exactly what we've seen. They own it all. Was Lindsey Williams right?
In a way, yes, but it's a wealth transfer, though. It's not just going to the banks. The money is going to the government to also speculate with, so the government can continue to spend money and continue to, especially in the US's case, continue to grow the welfare and warfare states. So it's not just the government interest. It's not just the banks. It's also other large corporations like General Electric and the oil companies and the pharmaceutical companies. These guys are getting, and the new crony scheme is a lot of the alternative energy guys. These guys are getting enormous amounts of subsidies with Al Gore and crony capitalist Elon Musk. I do appreciate Elon Musk's entrepreneurship, but the amount of money he's getting, like easy government loans, he is paying them back. But it's total cronyism from some of these guys, and the government's just picking out winners and losers.
Well, let's turn our attention to silver. Silver has surged. It's up almost 8% from last week's lows, and silver and gold are both performing strongly once again. I don't think that there's anything that central banks or the powers that be can do at this point, Jason, to put the genie back in the bottle. People are waking up, and people understand just by looking at Venezuela that owning physical precious metals will save you from destruction. It'll save you from financial devastation. I guess 1 ounce of silver right now in Venezuela buys 5 or 6 months of food, and I heard that 1 ounce of gold will buy a home. Physical silver and physical gold are on the move and will continue to be, won't they, Jason?
Yeah, long term they will. In the short term, the bullion banks that manipulate the paper gold and silver price in many different ways, they can slow down the rate of increase that gold and silver increases with a number of different tricks. But in the physical market, especially in the supply side, I try to talk about this most. Because I think the problems in the silver market over the long term are going to come from the supply side. We're at around $2 per pound copper. So I really, in the copper market for supply and demand, I think this is important for silver investors because around 70% of all silver that's produced every year from mining companies is a byproduct of base metal mines, of copper mines. So most silver produced every year is a byproduct. It's not from primary silver mines. So we're at a copper price now, especially if we stay at these levels for another 6 to 18 months or go lower, where copper mines are going to be totally uneconomic. They've been uneconomic for a while now, but the copper companies have been figuring out ways to not go bankrupt or not shut down their mines. We're getting to those levels where the copper miners are wondering how they can either keep the mine going or not go bankrupt. So I think this will be good long-term for silver because a lot of copper that was being produced, a lot of the demand the last 15 years was artificial. China pulled many decades, a bunch of decades of demand forward for copper and base metals to do their fixed asset infrastructure spending. So they pulled, over 4 decades worth of demand of copper forward into only 15 years, building out all these buildings and towns and, subway systems and other infrastructure projects. So there's really not a lot of demand from other countries right now if you remove China. And the Chinese demand for copper and base metals is slowing down a lot. Going forward. So I think this is really good for silver. I don't know the paper price if we're gonna see $50 in a year or two, but I've said within 5 years I think we could probably see $50, and a lot of that, Sean, is gonna be because of, like I said, on the supply side, because of depletion. So over the next 5 or 10 years, a lot of the silver mines that have been brought online in the last 10 years, those reserves will be depleted, or any additional reserves at those mines will be lower grade or higher cost. So there will need to be a much higher silver price in order to economically remove silver from producing mines or bring new mines online. I don't know the exact silver price right now we're speaking. I don't have my Kitco website up, but we are not at a silver price, Sean, where a lot of new silver mines can come online yet. So the silver price would have to be $25, $30 again before we are at a silver price where a lot of primary silver producers are confident that they could bring new silver mines online again and for the silver price not to drop. So I think we're gonna see higher silver prices in the long term, based on negative interest rates and based on increasing demand for silver in industrial uses and also increasing investment demand. There's a lot of people in India and China with a rising gold price who see the gold to silver ratio as good for silver.
Yeah.
that silver's a better buy.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is you said 5 years, maybe $50. You don't know when it's going to hit that. But here's the thing, and I've made this point in recent interviews. The collapse of the dollar, the loss of confidence in the petrodollar, the move to a world currency as the Rothschilds predicted in 1988 on the cover of their Economist magazine, get ready for a world currency in 2018. It's right around the corner. And when the dollar dies, that's when we'll see silver and gold go to the moon when priced in USD. All right, last question for you. What does financial history tell us about where we are right now and what may be about to come, Jason?
Sure. Well, this is my expertise. I was a historian in college, and I enjoy studying history. I've read a lot of financial history books. I think we're a mix of the 1920s and 30s. So we've got a lot of stupid central banker policy. We've had booms created, artificial credit booms created by central banks, and we're in the bust phase of it. The central banks are trying to delay the bust with even more credit and even more money creation, massive amounts of money creation. In the past, the money creation used to come from fractional reserve lending, where the banks themselves used to loan a lot of money into existence. But right now, Sean, we have unprecedented levels of the central banks themselves increasing the money supply without fractional reserve lending. So we have central banks willing to, just in the next 12 months, not even counting any future Federal Reserve increases, we're going to have over $2 trillion added to the money and credit supply globally from asset purchase programs from central banks. So that's in addition to all the other liquidity injections and programs of QE or whatever names they call it, either covert or overt currency swaps. What I can tell you, though, is we have a combination of the 1920s and 30s right now with mistakes like that. We also have rising fascism and people calling for more socialism and ending capitalism, which is very reminiscent of the 1920s and 30s as well, where more government agencies were created, massive amounts of New Deal programs. Larry Summers is calling for $2 trillion worth of infrastructure spending. That's probably going to be part of either candidate's jobs program, either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Both of them have talked about infrastructure jobs. The other part of financial history that I see a lot of relevance for economically is the 1970s stagflation. The differences during the 1970s stagflation is Paul Volcker was able to keep raising interest rates to eventually, stop inflation and get people's confidence back in the currency. There is no Paul Volcker out there. Paul Volcker has said now that there is no way to raise interest rates like that anymore without totally collapsing things. And also during the 1970s, a lot of businesses were more honest about the amount of inflation in the system, and they were willing to raise wages for workers to offset that. We're not going to see that now. So we're going to see the worst of both worlds. We're going to see much worse increasing stagflation in the real economy, where the worker struggles to either find a full-time job or piece together a living with multiple part-time jobs, while their bills for everyday living necessities, for food, healthcare, education, rent, utilities, those things go up pretty much every single year, 7 to 12%, or every couple years they're going to increase 7 to 12%. And the government statistics are not reflecting this. On top of that, unfortunately, Sean, I see a lot of repeat with, obviously we have new technology and social media, so this is actually magnifying things. I see, a lot of social problems like in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. Excuse me, it was more the 60s and 70s, not the 1950s, although the 1950s things started then. So I think, this is thanks to social engineering and cultural Marxism that's been going on from the central planners in government for over 100 years. And there's just so many examples of this. The politicians and bureaucrats and academics who love Marxism and socialism have been trying to divide the U.S. by race, gender, class, and age for a long time. So it's easier to plunder us and subjugate everyone with propaganda. And the people in power, Sean, whether that's, the academics or the bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C., making six-figure salaries, $150,000 a year and can't get fired, they just have double standards, the politically correct crowd. So these guys are total hypocrites. They'll do one thing and then say something that's completely different. And, listeners who don't believe me, who actually think that the economy is doing well, they can come to the new tourist attraction in D.C., and that's the Obamaville tent town that's come up near the Watergate Hotel under freeway overpasses. This thing in the last couple months, man, it's just grown in size. It's almost doubled in size in the last couple months since I saw it. So these things are going to be very common. And this is while the people in power, the central bankers like Janet Yellen and Stanley Fischer, talk about how well the economy is doing and the data showing and how they can raise interest rates. These guys are contradicting each other, because then we have San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank President John Williams talking about how the economy is doing bad and how there needs to be inflation targeting because there's deflation. And then we have Janet Yellen also in her Jackson Hole speech. She says on one point, contradicting herself, that the economy is doing well and that they can increase interest rates. But then she also says in the same speech that that if there's another recession, more like depression, that the Federal Reserve can expand their balance sheet again at least another $2 trillion. So both of those things cannot be true. The people in power are total hypocrites. There are people waking up, like we discussed earlier in the interview, but unfortunately, I think they're going to place the blame on the wrong things. They don't understand that they're being lied to, that they're being brainwashed, and propaganda is being dumped on them. And so, there's just so many groups of people right now, Sean, in the United States fighting amongst themselves that are missing the big picture, that the elites like George Soros and so many of these other scumbags are doing things like this. They're paying all this money to all these groups, so we fight with each other, and we miss the point that, the Federal Reserve and the other government agencies and these other cartels and bureaucracies in Europe and Brussels and in DC are just stealing more and more from us and plundering us.
Yeah, plundering is the right word. And you mentioned the Federal Reserve expanding its balance sheet by another $2 trillion. I think I read $4 trillion is what they say they would need to save us from another shock event or seismic financial event. But as I've discussed with Andy Hoffman and Bill Holter, $4 trillion would not do the trick. The hole is too deep, the hole is too big, and there's nothing that can fill the hole at this point. Which is why, guys, you should prepare yourself for a collapse of the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar. That's my opinion, and I think physical silver and physical gold is one great way, or maybe the best way, the only way to actually do that with any sense of certainty. Tell people how they can subscribe to your YouTube channel, and tell them about your website, will you?
Sure. They can sign up for any email updates. We're going to be writing a report for reviewing 2016 and previewing 2017. They could go to the Wall Street for Main Street website. That's WLSTFRMAINST.com. There will be stock picks in the report and analysis of a bunch of different markets. There will be stock trades and potential long-term investments with dividend growth plays in there. So they can sign up for our email list. Our YouTube channel, we just crossed 2 million views. We're almost to 12,000 subscribers. So thanks for your help, Sean. And people just have to be mentally prepared for a lot of volatility in markets. Things are going to get if you think things are crazy now, wait until after the election's over. Things are going to be just really, really crazy going forward with the lies and propaganda in the mainstream media, whether it's the election or the economy. One person tried to tell me, he sent me this link to the Federal Reserve's balance sheet telling me that the Federal Reserve only has $22 million worth of currency swaps listed on there. And based on the source I spoke to, who was actually at the IMF meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2014, hearing all the presentations from members of the largest economies, the central banks and the treasury departments, and how the word the phrase currency swap was mentioned hundreds of times in presentations in 2014, I think it's a lot more than $22 million.
Yeah, I would suspect that's true. Guys, I should say one thing too. As it pertains to signing up for our newsletter at SGT Report, if you've seen that pop up and if you signed up, I want to thank you very much for doing so. I want to let you know too that we have written a newsletter and it has not gone out because we're having a lot of technical issues on the back end, and my webmaster, I think, has been unhealthy or sick because he's not been getting back to me on trying to get that thing fixed. So my apologies if you've not received a newsletter. We do intend to start sending those out, though, hopefully in the very near future. And I want to thank you very much for supporting us and checking us out at sgtreport.com, the corporate propaganda antidote. Real news 24/7. Thanks for listening and have a terrific week.